Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Lunch with Pippa Hudson.
And now, Consumer Talk, featuring Wendy Knowler.
Wendy is with us in studio today in a very important conversation about travel insurance exclusions for older travelers. Something that many of you, and many of us, I should say, because I didn't know about this until reading the prep for today's show, might not be aware of. So we're going to tackle that in the first half hour, and then after 2:30 we'll circle back to some feedback on last week's conversation around pricing disparity errors, and we've got a very interesting case of mislabeling in a store, which a listener has flagged with us. So lots to get through today. You can join the conversation on 021 446 0567 or by sending a WhatsApp to 072 567 1567. Welcome back, Wendy.
Thank you, Pippa.
We've discussed several times before how important it is to think about travel insurance. If you're going to spend a lot of money on an overseas trip, please think about travel insurance. And we've talked about the fact that you get very basic cover when you buy your air ticket with your credit card. But we've also, almost every time we've spoken about this topic, spoken about how it can be wise to consider topping that up. And Wendy, every time we discuss it, older listeners phone in bemoaning how difficult it is to get proper cover once you are over a certain age. And today's case study is a really good example of how difficult it is and how much is in the fine print about the cover not being quite what you expect it to be.
As is the case with every insurance policy, alas. So that makes it really, really crucial for us to read the fine print, as annoying and boring as it can be as a task. And especially if you're traveling and you're over 70, there's some exclusions that apply over 70 and others that kick in from 75, and I think others from 80 as well, because you will definitely find that there are all types of exclusions, and you may decide that it's not worth it, or you make sure that you've got cover with your own home-based medical scheme, find out what their exclusions and their requirements are. Again, expect the best, but plan for the worst.
Yeah, and today's case study really illustrates how things can go wrong. Wendy, won't you tell us what happened?
Our listener Elsie Witten wrote us to share what she termed a very expensive lesson in travel insurance that she and her husband learned on their recent trip to India. Her intention in writing to us was to warn others, particularly those over the age of 70, about the exclusions that they discovered and which hurt them quite badly financially.
Yeah.
So she and her husband are 77 and 78 years old now, respectively. And in February, they left on a long saved for holiday in India. Elspie bought the tickets with her Standard Bank MasterCard because of the free insurance that was offered, and she extended it to the senior option at extra cost with TRC. And through her gap cover, she also bought extra medical insurance with Bright. So when disaster struck just 3 days into their holiday, they felt reassured, at least by the fact that they would be fully covered for the expenses, which is not only the medical expenses overseas, but the cancelled bookings. They had to get new flights, cost them extra. These things are really, really expensive. But that's not what happened at all.
So the cover was not, in fact, there. And Elsabe is with us on the line to tell us more. Elsabe, thank you so much for being willing to speak out so that others can learn from your experience. I'm really sorry that this happened to you, but welcome to CapeTalk.
Thank you so much, Pippa.
Won't you very briefly tell us what went wrong 3 days into your holiday?
My husband went into heart failure the third day we were in India. We were in a little village. He was transported to a bigger town to a cardiac facility, placed in ICU for until he was stabilized. When he was stabilized, we were advised to fly straight home, and which we did. On return, I thought we were covered, but I discovered we were covered for nothing. Even though the policy had return of stranded spouse and cancellation of journey, because my husband had a cardiac event and he was over 76 years old, and we were not covered for anything.
And Elsie, before we say anything further, can I just ask, how is your husband doing? How are things going?
He's doing great.
I'm glad.
He's doing great.
Okay, it's a relief to hear. Thanks for letting us know that. Wendy is with me here in studio, and I know she's got some follow-up questions for you. Over to you, Wendy.
Hi, Elsie. Thanks for
Hi,
agreeing
Wendy.
to chat to us today in order to spread the word among our listeners who could well have fallen into the same kind of situation as you two did. Will you tell us what claims you submitted and how the responses you got to those claims?
Right. I submitted claims via my Standard Bank card to Bright.
Yeah.
Because of my husband having a cardiac event and being over 75 years old, we received no compensation whatsoever. They would not entertain the claim despite sending all the medical reports and everything to them. Through TIC, which is through Santam, I took and our gap cover, I took 2 more policies, one for him and one for myself. But because he had a medical event that was cardiac over the age of 75, they would not repatriate me or pay anything on either of the claims.
Okay, sure. So it was an age thing, and I think
it was an age thing. It was a cardiac thing.
Yes.
We were told that had we lost all our luggage, they would have paid us, but
Sure.
they would not pay anything for a medical event. Now, the idea of taking out medical insurance is to cover yourself for a medical event.
Yeah.
Yes, and these policies don't just cover medical; they cover cancelled flights, having to book new flights, etc. And lost hotel bookings. But because it stemmed from a cardiac event, they wouldn't cover any of those. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
And
That's
Elspeth,
right.
did you have medical aid cover? Because I'm sort of thinking, I know most of the major medical aids have got an international travel benefit. Did you have anything like that?
No, we didn't. We belong to Momentum, and I have a hospital plan, and I was given no information that they actually had international cover.
Okay.
In the brochure
We'll get to
we
that.
received, there was no international cover information at all.
So in short, you submitted claims and they were uniformly rejected because the expenses had been incurred linked to a cardiac event in somebody over the age of 75. Wendy, you've got a follow-up question.
I do, and I think this is the clincher. You obviously dealt with 2 separate people via email in taking out these policies. You would have had to have submitted, among other things, both your and your husband's ID numbers, which reveal that you're both over 75.
Yes.
Did anybody in any form, via email, on the phone, or in any other way, say, just so that you're aware, because of your ages, there will be no cover for a cardiac event? Or was it just left in the terms and conditions and under exclusions?
Okay, Wendy, I sent an email. I received emails back. There was no personal contact. There was no advice given over the phone. There was no explanation of the policies.
And nothing in the emails about highlighting any exclusions that would pertain to people over a certain age?
Nothing. Just the plain policy was sent to me, all 19 pages of small, minute print.
Okay, so to be fair, I mean, consumers do have a responsibility to read the terms and conditions of the contract that they're getting into. So these insurers would be within their rights to rely on as long as it was sent, and I've had a look at the documentation. There are paragraphs, small fine print saying that. There's nothing that would force them to highlight it. So I think in terms of regulations, it's all fine. But I'm thinking, as a consumer journalist, it would be appropriate, in my view, when someone is dealing it. This wasn't done by a computer. You did send emails to actual people. I think it would be more, more consumer friendly for that person to just take a note of the IDs and say, just so you're aware, you're covered for this and this and this, but if either of you have a cardiac event or this and this and this, you won't have any cover. And that's why we've asked Christelle Coleman to join us.
And Christelle's with us on the line. Let me bring her in at this point. She is a travel insurance expert, Christelle Coleman of AMI Underwriters, who's been with us many times before. And Christelle, I know you're with us under time pressure, so thank you for joining us and welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
I love joining the show, and then I feel so embarrassed when I hear these stories about how poorly, insurance customers are sometimes treated. So yes, I'm here to answer the questions.
Christelle, I mean, as Elsie's just explained to us, and as Wendy's just filled in, the exclusion that says there is no cover if you are over 70 and suffer a cardiac event, it is there in black and white. It's in the small print, but nobody ever pointed that out to Elsabe. And do you think that's appropriate, given that she was applying with an ID number that clearly indicated that she would be on the wrong side of that exclusion? Would it have been best practice or even good practice, do you think, for that to have been highlighted to her?
So, Pippa, let's just think about a few things. Most people can only start traveling properly when they reach a certain age after they've, stopped working and they have the resources. So we have a lot of travelers that fall into that bracket.
That's great context.
Yeah.
Yes. I think the most important point to make here is that Elsabe, it is Elsabe, I think,
yes.
She bought a policy specifically, and she paid extra premium specifically for a senior traveler. Now, what on earth was she getting for the extra premium? And in that case, I believe the insurers should have said, here's your, the quote for your extra cover. Just know that you will have no cover if any medical incident would happen, or whatever it is, cardiac arrest incident.
Cardiovascular.
Yes, that's not asking too much. And Wendy, if we talk about treating customers fairly, the regulations around TCF, for me, the point of her inquiry was, I want a travel policy for over 75, and they gave her something that would have given her next to nothing cover. I'm actually, for me, it's a great lesson.
Yes, and also if you consider the likelihood of somebody in that age embarking on a trip having a cardiovascular event was not low, which is obviously why it's an exclusion. But then the person should, in fairness, have that brought to their attention. That's why I'm wanted to do this show, because it's not going to be brought to people's attention. And so let's normalize speaking about this among ourselves so that people go in with their eyes wide open. So, is there a product? Would there have been a product on the market which would have covered either of them for a cardiovascular event?
Okay, that's not a simple question to answer. I just want to mention that this is not a uniquely South African problem. If you go online and do some research, you'll see that this is something that is plaguing the financial regulators and ombuds all around the world. And some countries are even more strict than South Africa, and some international policies cater specifically for senior travelers, and then would say that you have to disclose any pre-existing medical conditions, which I assume from the brief chat wasn't the case. The person we were discussing now, it was an event that just happened. So it wasn't a pre-existing condition. No. I think there's an opportunity, to develop and price the risk. So you will pay a lot more premium, if you do travel at this age, and if something happens, but at least make it available. In South Africa, I know that there's a policy in the market, also underwritten by Bright, where you can buy an additional 1 million rand medical cover with 100,000 rand excess. Wendy, I used to run the African branch of a big international travel insurance business. And if you have cardiac arrest in the US, they won't let you through the back door of a hospital. And we once had to send, we would send money over in the middle of the night. And I think it was something like $3.5 million US before they would accept the patient into the hospital. Sure. 1 million rand will not get you into the reception of a hospital. So it's very expensive cover to acquire if you can acquire it. And don't think that if someone issued you a policy that the cover is in place. This is a great example. You're actually traveling at risk, and something can go wrong. And unfortunately, you find out too late. So, and another point I want to make is, you asked the question to the caller. these policies are purchased through these online portals, and it gets issued instantaneously with no real advice.
Okay.
And then you think, okay, fine, I've just paid 4,000 Rand. I've got a policy. I can get my visa approved, because most people just buy the policy because they want to get the visa approved.
Yeah. Yes.
But the reality of the matter is that things go wrong, and statistically and actuarially, things go wrong medically a lot more after the age of 75.
Yeah.
If insurers are not happy to give you the cover, or they restrict the cover, it means you have a big problem that can potentially happen to you after that age. So really think about traveling internationally. If you fall into this bracket. You asked a question about the medical aid. That was what I was going to say as well. A lot of the South African medical aid firms, I know that Discovery does it because I used to be a Discovery medical aid member. If you travel, you could let them know to activate the international travel benefit. And that's something that I would really advise.
Yes.
It came at no cost, but in this instance, they might have charged an extra premium. And that would have been a better place than doing it through the credit card and the bank. Not to diss those policies, but if you get something for nothing, which is often what you get with these travel policies on credit cards, there's lots of holes in the cover.
We'll get to what that was the case with Momentum, and I got quite a full response from them, which I'll share. But I'm mindful of the fact that we've got to let you go. I wanted to ask: is there a point at which most, and I think we've covered this before in previous shows, I think is it 80 where you will battle to get any travel cover at all? Certainly medically.
81.
Is it 81?
So it's 80 plus, and then it really becomes almost impossible. Unless you are an employee of a big company, or on the sort of retirement, funding, and I've heard of that, so people could still travel, but it becomes almost impossible to get cover over that age. And just before you let me go, I want to just make another point on medical insurance and medical travel insurance and pre-existing conditions. Mm-hmm. Now, we're talking about people over a certain age, but when you get to a certain age, you have lots of pre-existing conditions. I already have stuff at 53. So this specific example was about a client who had a pre-existing medical condition. It was a matter that was reported to the Ombuds in South Africa, and he had a problem inside his nose, a little sore inside his nose, and it kind of cleared up when traveling, and this thing just flared up and it became a big medical problem, and the claim was also rejected because he didn't disclose the nose problem when he took out the policy. Sure. So I can't stress this enough to everyone that's listening. If you take out travel insurance and you have to disclose existing or pre-existing medical conditions, disclose it, whether it is, whatever it is, because they could then easily turn around and then you're just stuck. India, imagine being stuck in India without medical support. I shudder to think.
Christelle, thank you so much. I know we have to let you go because you've got to dive into a 2:30 meeting, but we so appreciate your input this afternoon. Christelle Coleman of AMI Underwriters. And we're going to continue this conversation and circle back to Elsabe after the 2:30 news headlines, because there is this element of the international travel benefit that we need to emphasize that applies to Elsabe's case study as well. But our very, very sincere thanks to you again, Christelle Coleman of AMI Underwriters.
Only on CapeTalk.
Join the conversation.
I'm so sorry. A whole swoop of comments has just come through on the WhatsApp line. It seems that there was a bit of a bottleneck in getting those through. So I've suddenly just received a huge whack of people responding to the conversation. I was wondering why we hadn't heard from anybody because it's such a pertinent conversation. But before we read any of those, let's circle back to Elsabe, because we were talking earlier about the travel insurance policies which did not pay out because of that exclusion in the fine print that if you're 70 years or older, you will not be covered for a cardiac or cardiovascular related event or anything that goes with it. And Wendy, but the other thing that happened here is that Elsabe wasn't able to access any kind of cover through her medical aid.
Momentum.
So let me just bring Elsabe back in, who's been listening so patiently to what Christelle had to say, and thanks for staying with us. Elsabe, you said you've got a hospital plan with Momentum and you were completely unaware that there was any kind of international travel benefit associated with that. Knowing what you know now, had you gone through the hoops that they would have required you to, and we'll circle back to what those are, would you actually have had cover from them if you had filled out the forms that they had asked for, etc., before you went?
I would have tried.
You would have
Definitely,
tried, yeah.
I would have tried.
So I did reach out to Momentum, and this is the response I got.
So, Wendy, before we get the response from Momentum, I think let me just clarify what happened here is that when Elsabe did query with Momentum whether there was any cover, she was told they wouldn't pay because Elsabe and her husband had not completed a medical assessment form declaring that they were going overseas and officially sort of activating the cover.
I think assessment form is probably something else other than, because let me read the response. Members are required to inform us before they leave for an international trip. That's standard practice across medical aids, and it's certainly the case with my medical scheme. So I always make sure that I do that. So that's standard practice. Unfortunately, they said Mrs. Vitten did not let us know. If she had informed us, we would have had the opportunity to remind her of the additional requirements for people above a certain age or with certain medical conditions. But that depends on each member's health and age. These requirements are also reshared with all members annually. And then she's sent me a screenshot of a question. What should I do when traveling abroad to access my international emergency cover benefit? And then it says it's mandatory for you to pre-notify us. And then we don't... you have to fill in this questionnaire if you have any of these apply to you. You've been hospitalized in the 2 months prior to travel. You are registered on any of the health management programs, including chronic diseases, oncology, and organ transplant. You're older than 70 years. So you would have had to then, I think that's what they're talking about. Maybe that's the assessment form before you leave. Also applies if you're pregnant or if you have any underlying illness such as diabetes, hypertension. I mean, that applies to many, many, many people. Hypertension is the most common chronic condition. So most people would then have to go through a little process other than just clicking on a form in the app, which I've been currently doing. I should probably go through my scheme's little, list like this to see maybe. Yeah, so I'm also guilty of that. I mean, I have hypertension, but maybe if I had an incident involving hypertension overseas, they'd say, but you didn't declare this before you. Although they do. This is my chronic benefit on their scheme. But anyway, it's an interesting one. I think the lesson out of all of this is around your medical and travel cover is to interrogate absolutely everything and find out, as if you were at claims time, what you would need to produce before you leave while you're there. Remember, we had a case of someone who tried to claim they'd had an incident in some little Italian clinic or something, and they hadn't got a full enough report from the doctor. There was a language issue, and they didn't have enough information, and so the local medical scheme then just said, well, on the basis of clause 18.6b, we didn't get enough information from that hospital. So I think, for me, that's the learning out of this. And you've really got to put a lot of work into making sure, to ensuring that you get the claim that the benefits that you're paying for. Yeah.
So Elsabe, just to finish up with you, I mean, firstly, thank you for being prepared to share this experience so that we alert others to the fact that you really need to be aware of potential exclusions and read the fine print. How do you feel based on the experience you've just been through? I'm relieved to hear that your husband's doing much better, but do you think you will ever travel internationally again or be able to do so based on this experience and the fact that all of these claims have been denied? How does it make you feel about your future travel?
Well, it makes me not want to go, but we have children living overseas, and we've gone for the last 25 years every year overseas to see the children. So that's now not going to happen anymore. Sure. I can go on my own. What worried me was that all the policies had return of stranded spouse as a clause, as a part of the deal. And that did not apply. I was prejudiced because my husband had the cardiac event.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
That's an interesting point.
But because the event was triggered by an excluded issue, they're saying none of the benefits will apply. And Elizabeth, you're not alone in feeling that saying that feels unfair. I've got several listeners saying they shouldn't have accepted the payment for cover knowing how much was excluded.
Except that it wasn't excluding everything. These travel policies cover delays and lost luggage and having to rebook hotels and all that kind of thing. So that would be what they would say, is that it's not like there would be no cover whatsoever. But
but there was no cover. I was not refunded for coming home early or having to pay for.
I see what you're saying. Absolutely. Oh yes. Okay. Because the trigger event.
I was excluded because my husband was excluded.
Okay, I've got you. And you couldn't claim. Yeah, so then, yes, they should, from the mere age. And the fact that, look, a lot of the other events would have been covered, but the fact that it was a cardiovascular event, which people over a certain age are at high risk of experiencing. That's what Christelle was saying. So I really do think as far as current regulations go, they probably all can say, well, it's in our exclusions and we disclose it and all the rest. But I still feel very strongly that there should have been a more overt disclosure about something so material.
Greater transparency.
Yes.
Elizabeth, thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm so sorry for the really awful experience that you went through, but we really appreciate your joining us to discuss it and alerting so many others who can hopefully avoid finding themselves in the same position. We really do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Elizabeth Vetten.
CapeTalk.
Consumer Talk.
Call now on 021 446 0567.
Some very interesting WhatsApps coming through in response to that story. And Mateus, I absolutely agree with you, and I know Christelle does too, saying to all of the big corporates listening, it sounds like there is a massive gap in the market for traveling seniors. Perhaps an opportunity for a more progressive and likely very profitable business model. I just want to say, Christelle did say, it's going to be expensive. It is going to be loaded because there is a higher risk profile for this age of traveler. But if you're prepared to model it to factor in that risk and price it accordingly, how wonderful would it be for seniors to have the option of saying, I will be prepared. I have saved. I've waited my whole life to travel and I want to be able to do it knowing that I'm covered. So I will invest in, even if it's a very expensive policy, to have the option of having all the cover you need.
Yeah. And
it seems like a no-brainer.
As part of your saving.
Absolutely.
For the trip.
Yeah. This is Freddie's saying the important question is, was the company aware of their ages? Yes, they were, because they were in possession of that personal information. Freddie feels this is a case for the Ombudsman. I'm gratified to say here from one person who had a better, more transparent experience. So he says, my mom recently applied for additional travel insurance and she was informed that my dad would have exclusions for any cardiac events because of his age. Yeah, so there's somebody who was doing it the right way.
Yes.
Yeah.
They have to, it's about risk. And obviously it's not a risk that they want, that some of these insurers are wanting to take currently at the price that they're offering the insurance at. But you need to, but that's the reason why you need to know if you don't have that cover, and maybe perhaps try and find that cover. Let's hope we come back in a future show, Pippa, and talk about this new product.
It would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Manonia is saying sending small print documents to seniors is unprofessional. Most people over a certain age cannot read small letters, so in effect they do not actually get the information. That's also a valid point. And then Joan saying the big problem is with travel insurance over the age of 75 that you can't separate the medical and the luggage, etc. You have to just sort of, the message has just disappeared. She says, Discovery has always covered my medical insurance, but I have to buy very expensive insurance which covers both if I want my luggage to be insured.
Yes.
Interesting point.
So just to reiterate what Christelle said, had the veterans had informed their medical scheme before leaving, they would have had we don't know for sure, but they would have been able to claim, and I'm sure had most of the hospital hospital costs in India covered because of that prior disclosure.
Okay.
They might have actually had to pay extra, given that they were over 70, but they would have at least had that discussion and gone,
There would
gone
have been
over
some
with
cover.
information and some cover in place.
Yeah. Kathy writes in to say, I'm 78 with Fed Health Medical Aid, and they have advised me I am not covered at all by them when travelling internationally.
Pre-80 is quite young for that to happen.
But at least they have told you up front. Again, it's what we're talking about here is not just the issue of whether cover is offered, and
It's
understanding the actuarial reasons why you do have to wait and charge more for senior cover. It's the way it's being communicated or not communicated to the customers that is really the nub of the real issue today.
Yeah.
So thanks for raising that. Wendy, to change tack completely, a brief but interesting piece of feedback from one of our listeners who was with us last week listening to the piece that we did on pricing discrepancies and how different retailers handle the mistakes that do happen.
Yes.
What did Mark share with you?
Mark wrote in to say that he was in the retail trade for 40 years with various companies, including Pick n Pay, ShopRite, Checkers, and in senior buying positions. He said, I can only endorse your advice and urge customers to always check their till slips. I always photograph items on special and keep their pamphlet handy. Remember, one of our listeners phoned in to say take
that.
the picture, especially if it's a promotional item, because you can't take pictures of every single shelf tag. And then listen to this. I love this stat. Well, I'm alarmed by it. He said, over the past 3 years, if I average out price discrepancies on a shop of about 400 Rand, I'll find mistakes on every third till slip.
Sure.
The mistakes vary from 10 Rand to 50 Rand. My habit is to immediately check the slip after I've packed the goods into my car, and I immediately return to the store and collect my refund. So, yes, and he didn't comment on the fact that Woolies and Pick n Pay have those compensation policies. But if you work on his experience of 1 in every 3 till slips having an overpricing error, there's a lot of refunds and compensation on top of that in some cases to be had if you are vigilant about making sure that the price on the shelf is what scans at the till.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you very much for that interesting and rather alarming feedback. And just to circle back, Jill and one or two others saying, Wendy, thank you for this wake-up call about the travel insurance.
My pleasure.
I think really important content covered today. And I'm going to add, thank you for the wake-up call about remembering to inform your medical aid if you're going overseas.
Yeah.
I'm leaving tomorrow.
There you
and
go.
I know I downloaded the
Perfect.
documents about what my cover is, but I'm sitting here going, did I actually tell them from this date to that date? I'm going to go home and do that this afternoon. Thank you, Wendy, for the reminder. Lynn's saying, we are lucky enough to travel to see our family in Canada annually, and we always take extra insurance as we are over 70. This year, for the first time, there is a new clause that there will be no payout if the claim is caused by war or terrorism.
Oh.
That's a fairly standard clause in a lot of insurance products. I've certainly seen it before.
I would certainly ask you to just, given your ages, sorry to say, just to check the exclusions. Go into the smallest of small print and just make sure, or ask the question up front in an email to the insurer to say, I just want to make doubly sure, are there any medical exclusions that apply to us given that we're over 70?
I'm wondering if someone's expecting a war between Canada and the USA. Just saying. Okay. And then, going back to the refund conversation last week, Lucy was the one who wrote into us about having been overcharged at Pick n Pay. And we were the ones who said to her she must go back to the branch. And she said, I went to Pick n Pay and told them I've been in touch with Wendy Knowler and that I had been told what their compensation policy was. It was taken to the manager who came out to apologize profusely. And instead of the double refund I was owed, I got a triple one with thanks from Lucy in Deep River. I think it was the jersey that she was overcharged for and only realized when she got home.
She was due. Yeah. I can't remember what it was, but thank you so much, Lucy, for coming back to us as we'd asked to let us know how that went. And that's
absolutely
very gratifying response. Thank you.
Okay, now last thing to quickly, I wonder if we're going to have time for this, Wendy. Let's quickly just squeeze in this because it's sort of on the same note about labeling issues and problems and mistakes. Jenny mailed us yesterday pointing out a very blatant error. Well, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Error in advertising. She said, I received a flyer in the post box from Builders Warehouse advertising 100% cotton golf shirts at just under 170 Rand. My husband loves golf shirts, so we liked the look of these. Off we went to the store.
They made a special trip.
So they made a special trip deliberately prompted by that flyer. Now, Jenny happens to be a qualified fashion designer, and she spotted straight away that the so-called 100% cotton golf shirts shirts did not look or feel like 100% cotton. But that is what the advert in the flyer said. And when they looked at the tag attached to the shirt, that is what that tag said. The label said very largely in bold print, 100%
Absolutely,
cotton.
we've seen the photos.
Jenny was still not convinced, so she then went digging inside the shirt to find the sort of washing instructions label, and sure enough, that label said this garment is made of 65% polyester and only 35% cotton. And they took it to the front desk to try and get the discrepancy resolved. Long story short, the person who came down to help them was quite dismissive and said, well, had they been 100% cotton, it would have been much more expensive. But she's absolutely right in saying it's not on. She feels it's fraudulent to be marketing something as 100% cotton when it's very clearly not. And she wanted to know what you made of it. Wendy, you took it up straight away with both the store and the brand.
No, not the brand. I just went to Massmart, which owns Builders, forwarded Jenny's email with the photos that's, proved everything she was saying. And I said, that I didn't feel it was obviously a supplier. First of all, the buyer should possibly have noticed. And secondly, the response was, it would have been much more expensive if it was 100% cotton. It's not appropriate.
Good enough, yeah.
So the answer I got this morning was that the supplier, very sorry about all of that, and the supplier will be getting in touch with Jenny and myself directly, which happened while I was driving in to the studio. And the response came from Kevin Schroeder of Beck Trading, and he said, as discussed, the Golfer is definitely a 65-35 poly cotton. In other words, it's mostly polyester. And we regret that the swing tag states 100% cotton. We opened a non-conformance immediately on this error and found that the swing tag quality control process from our print supplier allowed this error to creep in. We've taken the necessary corrective action to ensure it doesn't happen again. We're a 32-year-old business and we employ more than 2,000 people in 2 factories who all rely on us to make the right decisions and support our loyal customers. Basically, we're very sorry. We will manufacture at our expense 100% cotton Golfers. I'm reading this for the first time, actually, with longer sleeves, because that's what they liked. The husband liked the fact that the sleeve was a bit longer than the usual golf shirt. So they're going to make 5, at their expense, 100% cotton Golfers with longer sleeves, as is the husband's preference, in the color of his choice, and will deliver directly to any address of your choice, which I think is a lovely save.
That's very good response. Yeah.
So I think that's five-star response. And well done, Jenny, on raising the issue.
Acknowledging the issue. As I always say, the 4 A's, it's acknowledge the issue, apologize for it, make amends if you can, and alter your behavior going forward. And they've ticked all of the boxes.
Pippa's doing the next consumer talk all on her own.
No, I'm not. I'm not even going to be here for the next one. But Wendy, well, bravo to them. That's a good outcome. And Jenny, how lovely for you and for your husband,
Let's
rather,
see
that you're going to get the right kind of shirt.
And 5 of them at no cost.
But thank you again for raising it, because a more vigilant consumer than a qualified fashion designer I can't think of. Thank you for putting your skills to the service of all the other customers who might have unwittingly bought it. And that's where we must wrap things up for today. But Wendy is back next week with Bianca, and I will chat to you again in 2 weeks' time. Let's see. Thanks so much, Wendy Knowler.